I never thought I'd be the guy writing about his wife cheating on him, but here I am. My name's Jason, and I thought I had a pretty normal life. Married to Lisa for 6 years, good job, a nice house, the usual. We had our ups and downs, sure, but I never suspected she'd do something like this. The signs started small, little things you brush off at first. Lateness, excuses, maybe a little more attitude than usual. I just chalked it up to stress or her being bitchy, which she could be when she didn't get her way. The real trouble started when I noticed her phone acting weird. She'd hide it, get defensive if I looked at it, and I swear she was more secretive about her texts and calls. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband, so I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Plus, she started staying out later than usual, claiming she had girls' nights or some work thing. I know what those are, though. I've seen enough movies and I've known enough stories from friends to recognize the signs. Still, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Then came the insomnia. I've been dealing with some sleep issues for a while, stress, work, life in general. I agreed to do this sleep study at the local clinic just to see if it could help. It was scheduled overnight, and I thought it would be a good way to get some peace and quiet, maybe catch up on some sleep I'd been missing. I never expected that night would change everything. They wired me up with all these electrodes, placed sensors all over my head, and I was supposed to sleep in a small room with cameras and microphones watching me. The doctor warned me I'd be sedated for part of it so I wouldn't move around much. Honestly, I was exhausted, so I didn't think much about it. But that's when I first saw Lisa. Not in person, obviously. I was knocked out for the sedation. But I saw her through the monitors. She was in the room with the sleep tech, a guy named Mark, I think. She was acting weird, overly close, whispering, touching his arm, and then I saw her lean in and kiss him. I woke up the next morning feeling like I'd been by a truck. I didn't even remember dreaming, but I had this terrible feeling in my gut. I replayed the footage in my head and I knew what I saw. Her lips on him, her hand on his chest, her leaning into him like she was craving his attention. I couldn't believe it. My wife Lisa, the woman I trusted with everything, was cheating on me with someone I only knew as a stranger in that moment. I felt sick. My stomach turned and I could feel the anger boiling. How long had this been going on? Did she even care that I was lying there unconscious while she was doing this? I wanted to scream, to confront her right then and there, but I knew I had to keep my cool, at least for a little while. I needed to process what I'd seen, figure out my next move. But the shock hit me hard and I realized I was no longer just betrayed. I was humiliated. My wife, the woman I thought I knew, was out there sneaking around with some guy during a sleep study I was doing to get better. I kept replaying it over and over, her lips on him, her hands on his chest like he was some kind of prize she was eager to win. I never thought she'd be capable of cheating, especially not during something so intimate and personal, but there it was, clear as day. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind kept racing. What am I supposed to do now? Should I confront her? Should I leave? I felt a mix of rage, sadness, and confusion swirling inside me. How could she lie so easily? How could she look me in the eyes and pretend everything was fine? I knew I had to face her eventually, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. That first night after discovering the truth was the worst of my life so far. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a freight train. My head was pounding, and my stomach was still churning from the shock I'd experienced the night before. I knew I had to talk to Lisa, but I didn't want to do it right away. I needed time to gather myself, figure out what I was going to say, and decide what my next move should be. I stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the footage from the sleep study in my mind. Her face, her lips, the way she touched him, everything felt like a punch to the gut. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. How had I missed all the signs? What else had she lied about? I felt a mixture of betrayal and anger brewing inside me, but I also knew I had to keep my cool. Confronting her in a rage wouldn't help anything. Not yet. I decided to check her phone. I figured if she was hiding things, there might be some evidence there. I slipped out of bed when she was in the kitchen, pretending to be busy with breakfast, and quietly unlocked her device. Her messages were mostly innocent, nothing suspicious there, at least not on the surface. But then I found a hidden folder with a different password. My stomach clenched tighter. I didn't even know she had secret folders. I tried the password and it worked. Inside, I found messages with Mark, the sleep tech from the clinic. They weren't just innocent exchanges. There were flirtatious texts, pictures she'd sent him, and even plans to meet up again. My heart started pounding so loud I thought I'd pass out. I couldn't believe she had been this reckless. It was one thing to cheat. It was another to lie so blatantly. I felt betrayed on every possible level. I read her words, her excuses, the way she justified her actions. She told him she was bored, lonely, and that I didn't satisfy her anymore. I could barely breathe. That was the moment I decided I had to confront her. I couldn't just sweep this under the rug. I waited until she left for work, then I called her from a burner phone I bought just for this. When she answered, I told her I knew everything. Silence on the other end, then her voice full of venom. "Jason, you're overreacting. You don't know what you're talking about." I lost it then. How could she lie so easily? I laid it all out, her texts, her kiss, everything I'd seen. Her reaction was pure bullshit. She started yelling, calling me paranoid, insecure, jealous, and basically trying to gaslight me into thinking I was crazy. She said she'd never do something so disgusting, that it was a mistake, that Mark was just a friend helping her with her sleep issues. I didn't buy it for a second. The way she lied so convincingly, the way she spun her web of bullshit, I realized she was a master at lying and I was just a fool for believing her. I hung up feeling numb. I couldn't believe how she could be so callous, so manipulative. At that moment I felt everything: anger, sadness, betrayal, and a deep sense of loss. I thought I knew her, but I didn't know her at all. She had been sneaking around, lying, cheating behind my back while I was vulnerable in that sleep study, completely unaware. I didn't sleep that night either, but this time I was awake, stewing in my own rage, trying to figure out what to do. How do you come back from something like this? How do you even look at her the same way again? I felt like I was drowning in a sea of betrayal, and I wasn't sure if I'd come up for air anytime soon. The days that followed were a blur. Every time I saw Lisa, I felt this strange mix of heartbreak and anger. She kept trying to act normal, acting like everything was fine, like she hadn't just betrayed me in the worst way possible. But I wasn't buying it. I saw through her fake smiles and her forced "I'm sorry" that she kept repeating, and honestly, it made me even angrier. How could she pretend like nothing happened? Like I was supposed to forget the fact that she was screwing some guy while I was lying there unconscious. I knew I needed to get some space, so I moved into the guest bedroom. It felt like I was living with a stranger. I started digging deeper, trying to find more evidence of her lies, her bullshit. I looked through her social media, her email account, anything I could get my hands on. I wanted to know if this was just a one-time thing or if she'd been sneaking around for months. Turns out, it was more than just that night at the sleep study. There were messages from weeks ago, plans to meet up, secret texts. She'd been cheating on me for a while, and I never saw it coming. What really hit me was how she tried to deny everything when I confronted her again. That bitchy attitude. The way she spun her lies, she insisted I was crazy, that I was imagining things, that she'd never do something so disgusting. But the evidence was right in front of me. I felt sick every time I thought about it. The fact that she could lie so easily, so convincingly, made me realize how much I'd been blind. I'd trusted her completely, and now I felt like a fool. One night I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I sat her down and demanded the truth face to face. She rolled her eyes, scoffed, and started calling me paranoid again. I wasn't in the mood for her bullshit. I told her I knew everything, about the messages, the kiss, the plans. Her face twisted into this bitchy expression, like she thought she could just talk her way out of it. She looked me dead in the eyes and told me I was overreacting, that I was making a big deal out of nothing. That's when I snapped. I couldn't believe she could be so cold, so dismissive of what she'd done. I told her I didn't want to talk anymore, that I needed time to think, and I walked out of the room. I felt my fists clench, my jaw tighten. I had never felt so betrayed in my entire life. All those years together, all the plans, the promises, wiped out in a single moment. I knew I had to decide what to do next, but part of me wanted to just end it right then and there. The worst part was the realization that I still loved her, even after everything. I kept asking myself how she could do this to me, how she could pretend like nothing was wrong. It was like I was living in some kind of nightmare, except I couldn't wake up. I kept thinking about the nights I'd spent trying to fix my sleep, thinking it was just stress, trying to be a good husband. Meanwhile, she was out there, sneaking around, lying and cheating. I couldn't understand how someone could be so selfish and manipulative. I started questioning everything, my judgment, my happiness, whether I even knew her at all. I'd always been the guy who believed in honesty, loyalty, trust. And now I felt completely broken, wondering if I'd ever be able to trust again. I knew I wasn't going to let this go without some kind of fight, though. I was furious and I was planning what I'd do next. I knew I had to decide whether I was going to forgive her and try to fix this, or cut her loose and start over. Either way, I wasn't going to be a fool again. Not after what I'd found out. The days turned into a nightmare. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been completely played. Every time I looked at Lisa, I saw the same sneer she'd given me when I confronted her. She kept insisting it was just a mistake, that she didn't mean for it to go this far. Yeah, right. I'd seen her messages, the pictures she sent him, her plans. She didn't just accidentally kiss him in some drunken stupor. She wanted this, and she was good at lying her way out of it. I started to think about what I should do next. Part of me wanted to scream, to shout at her face, to smash something. But I knew that wouldn't solve anything. Instead, I began to plan. I wanted her to see that I wasn't some idiot who could be easily manipulated. I decided I'd need proof, more evidence, something undeniable. So I installed a hidden camera in the bedroom, just in case she tried to hide anything more. She didn't know I'd done it, and honestly, I wasn't sure if I wanted her to know. I just needed to catch her in the act again, or see if she'd slip up. In the meantime, I started talking to a few friends I could trust, people who knew about relationships and could give me some perspective. I told them everything, how she lied, how she cheated, how she dismissed me like I was nothing. Most of them told me to kick her out, to leave her, that I deserved better. But I wasn't sure I was ready yet. Part of me still loved her, or at least wanted to believe that there was some way to fix this. One night, I decided to confront her again, this time with all the evidence I'd gathered. I sat her down in the living room, showing her the messages and the pictures I'd saved. Her face went pale, then red with anger. She started to yell, calling me crazy, paranoid, insecure, again. She told me I was blowing things out of proportion. She even tried to twist it around, saying I was the one who'd been neglecting her, that I was the problem. I couldn't believe her. How could she turn the tables like that? I felt like I was losing my mind. I told her she had two choices: tell the truth or I'd leave and never come back. She looked at me with that bitchy smirk and said, "Fine, I'll tell you the truth." That's when she admitted she'd been seeing Mark for months, more than just the night at the sleep study. She said they'd been sneaking around, lying to me, and she didn't care if I found out. She even had the nerve to say she didn't love me anymore, that I was just a backup she kept around because she was bored. Hearing her say that shattered me. I felt my chest tighten, my vision blur. I'd always fought for her, tried to fix things, and now she was telling me she'd been cheating, lying, and planning her escape all along. I was furious, beyond furious. I wanted to scream, to yell at her for being so callous, so selfish. But all I could do was sit there, staring at her with a mixture of heartbreak and rage. I realized then that she had completely checked out, that she'd been planning her exit for a while, and I was just too blind to see it. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything, trying to understand how I'd been so stupid, how I'd let myself trust someone who didn't deserve it. I felt like I'd been holding on to a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, we could fix this. But now I knew better. She didn't want to fix it. She wanted out, and she'd been lying to me the whole time. That realization was worse than the betrayal itself. I had no choice but to accept that my world was falling apart, and I was left standing in the ruins of what I thought was a happy marriage. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd aged 10 years overnight. My mind was racing nonstop, replaying everything she'd said, every lie, every betrayal. I knew I had to make some decisions, but I wasn't in a rush. I needed time to process, to plan my next move carefully. I couldn't just pack up and leave her without knowing exactly what I wanted, whether I could forgive her or if I had to cut my losses altogether. I started by gathering everything I could, her phone, her laptop, the evidence I'd uncovered. I wanted to be prepared for whatever came next. I wasn't going to let her deceive me again, not without a fight. I also called a lawyer I knew from work. It was weird, talking about divorce and splitting assets, but I knew I had to get ahead of this mess. I told him everything, and he said I'd have a solid case, especially with all the evidence I'd collected. That's a bitter pill to swallow, realizing your life is about to be turned upside down. Meanwhile, Lisa kept acting like nothing was wrong. She'd come into the room, wearing that fake innocent look, trying to charm her way back into my good graces. But I wasn't falling for it anymore. I saw right through her. Every fake apology, every attempt to blame me just made me angrier. I couldn't believe I'd let her do this to me, trust her, love her, believe she was the woman I married. And now she was just a stranger who'd played me for a fool. One afternoon, I finally decided I'd had enough. I called her into the living room and told her I was done. I told her I knew everything about the affair, her lies, her plans to leave. I looked her in the eye and said I wasn't going to be a fool anymore. I told her she could leave if she wanted, but I wasn't going to sit around and be her doormat. She started crying, that fake "I'm sorry" look on her face, but I didn't buy it. I told her she could pack her things, that I was done pretending everything was okay. That was the hardest thing I'd ever had to do. But then she snapped. She got angry, started yelling that I was overreacting, that I was the one who'd been distant and neglectful. She called me names, accused me of being insecure, and even tried to manipulate me into taking her back. I felt my blood boil. How dare she call me insecure when she's the one sneaking around? I told her I didn't want to hear her lies anymore. I was done. I told her to leave, and she stormed out of the house, crying, calling me names, telling me I'd regret this. But honestly, I felt nothing but relief. Finally, I had some clarity. I was done being a fool. That night, I finally let myself feel the full weight of everything. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the anger. I'd loved her, believed in us, and she'd thrown it all away for some guy she barely knew. I kept asking myself how I'd been so blind, so naive. But deep down, I knew I'd done everything I could to save what was left of us. The only way forward now was to pick up the pieces and rebuild my life without her. I realized that trust, once broken this badly, is nearly impossible to repair. And I also realized that I deserved better than someone who could lie and cheat so casually. As I sit here, writing this out, I know the road ahead will be tough. But I also know I won't be naive again. I've learned that people can surprise you, sometimes in the worst ways. And I've learned that I have to look out for myself, no matter how much it hurts to let go of someone you once loved. I don't have all the answers yet, and maybe I never will. But one thing for sure, I won't be a fool again. And I'll make damn sure I find someone who respects me, not someone who cheats behind my back. The days after she left were the hardest I've ever experienced. The house, which used to be filled with her bitchy comments and her constant presence, suddenly felt like a ghost town. Silence replaced the chaos, and I was left alone with my thoughts, every single betrayal replaying in my mind. I kept asking myself how I hadn't seen it coming, how I'd been so blind to her lies. But deep down, I knew I wasn't to blame entirely. Some part of me still clung to hope for a different ending, but the facts were clear now. Lisa had been dishonest, manipulative, and reckless, all for some fleeting thrill with Mark. I threw myself into trying to rebuild my life. I started hitting the gym, focusing on my work, trying to find some peace in the chaos. I cut all contact with her. No more texts, no more calls, no more excuses. I knew I couldn't afford to dwell on the past, no matter how much it hurt. Trust was shattered beyond repair, and I accepted that. But I also realized I was finally free, free from her lies, her manipulation, her bitchy attitude. I didn't need that toxicity in my life anymore. Looking back, I can honestly say I've learned a lot from this experience. I learned that blindly trusting someone can leave you vulnerable, and that sometimes love isn't enough to save what's broken. I learned that you have to be careful, really careful, about who you let into your life. And I learned that revenge isn't about getting back at her. It's about reclaiming your own peace, your own happiness. I no longer feel the rage that consumed me in the beginning. Now I feel a kind of cold clarity. It's like I've been cleaned out, emptied of the foolish hope that we could fix this. As for Lisa, I don't know if she truly feels remorse or if she's just sorry she got caught. Honestly, I don't care anymore. That chapter is closed. I hope she realizes what she lost, what she threw away over some guy's sex and her own selfishness. But that's her problem now. Mine is. Moving on, rebuilding trust in myself and making sure I never let someone betray me like that again. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this. Be cautious with who you trust and never ignore the red flags. Love is important, but self-respect is even more so. Don't let anyone make you feel small or unworthy. And if you ever find yourself in a situation where your partner cheats or manipulates you, don't make excuses. Cut your losses, walk away, and remember, you deserve honesty, loyalty, and someone who truly cares. Because at the end of the day, all the material things, all the promises, don't matter if the foundation of trust isn't there. I'm finally learning that the hard way.